Hello, and thank you for taking the time to join today's webinar. My name is Scott Dill. I'm on the business development team here with the Real Story Group, and we're excited to have our principal analyst, Teresa Regli, on the line with us. She'll be joining us momentarily, and will be walking us through 5 key trends to expect in the DAM world in the coming year, along with some crossover trends with digital marketing technology as a whole. A couple of housekeeping items of note as we get started here. First, if you have questions, you'll see there's a questions tab in the GoToMeeting session. You can actually just enter the questions in there, and we'll get to those either during the presentation or at the very end of the session. And also, as an attendee today, you'll be getting the slides from the session, and you can feel free to share those with your colleagues internally. And then for our subscribers that are on the line, first, thank you very much for being Real Story Group customers. The presentation is actually going to be available in a recorded form within your library in the next day or two, so you can please feel free to log in to that and share that with your fellow subscribers internally as well. For those that are new to Real Story Group, welcome, and again, thank you very much for joining us. What's different about Real Story Group versus some of the other analyst firms you may be familiar with is we are completely independent. We don't do any work for the vendors that we evaluate. We don't accept money from them for special treatment in our reviews, and we don't advise them on their strategy at all. Our fundamental purpose as a company is to really help technology users and buyers make smart technology choices. And we do that in a couple different ways. First, we provide detailed reviews of over 150 products from about 100 different vendors in digital workplace and digital marketing technology. Along with that, our subscribers are able to access tools where they can actually get customized short lists based on their particular needs, goals, and strategic considerations, and also compare the vendors side by side so you can really get some detailed analysis of their strengths, but maybe more importantly, their weaknesses and where they might fall short. If you're not in technology selection mode, that's okay, because we have a product called RealScore, where you can actually measure the effectiveness of your incumbent people, processes, and technology. You can then benchmark yourselves against your industry peers, and then working with our analyst team, see some visual examples of where your business can improve, and then work on developing a strategic roadmap moving forward. Finally, we do participate in a select number of consulting engagements throughout the year where we'll actually come on site and sit on the same side of the table with you as you bring in vendors to really help you to select the technology that's going to be the right fit for your particular needs, and also cut through the marketing hype that those vendors will really bring to the table during those presentations. So that's another area in which we can add some value to your organization. As I mentioned, we do cover about 150 products in digital workplace and digital marketing technology. So with the next slide, you'll see our sort of infamous subway map that shows our different coverage areas along with the different vendors that we evaluate in those particular areas. It's both digital workplace and digital marketing technology, and the focus of today's presentation is going to be on the digital marketing side. So with that, I'll hand it over to Teresa.
Thank you, Scott. Hello, everyone. Happy New Year. Wherever you are, hope you're having a great day. And as Scott said, thanks a lot for joining us. If you've never attended one of our webinars before, hi, I'm Teresa Regli, Principal Analyst for Marketing Technology at Real Story Group, and I have a particular focus on digital asset management for about the last 8 years now. It's been my world, so I'm happy to talk today specifically about what's going on in digital asset management as far as larger trends and how that fits into the marketing technology world, really. So let's dive right in. So I'm going to talk about, as Scott mentioned, 5 key trends. And of course, these aren't the only things going on. I just think they're really the most interesting ones going on right now. And along with my colleague Mark Davey in the UK, we spend a lot of time talking about these over the last few weeks and kind of getting a sense of how how the industry is progressing in these various areas. So I'll go through each one and talk about them individually, and then I'll also put it into a larger context of marketing technology trends. We did do a webinar back in December with my colleague Kashyap Kampela, who's our research director for digital marketing and marketing automation, where we talked about some broader trends. So I'm going to start there and just talk about some of these broader trends for marketing technology, because we do consider digital asset management a really foundational trend for, I should say, a foundational technology for marketing and doing marketing better. If you're a marketer yourself, or a brand manager of some kind, or maybe you're just in charge of producing content for your organization, you probably hear these sorts of terms a lot. And when it comes to omni-channel strategy is a big focus for marketing technologists right now. Things like content marketing, doing more efficient campaign management, video marketing, of course, is huge today. And just, of course, developing a better customer experience is really vital to what we're all trying to do. And DAM, as I mentioned, isn't really it's not a trend in MarTech, it's a foundational technology in MarTech. So when we think about doing better video marketing and creating a better customer experience, helping our colleagues and our organizations drive towards better marketing automation, omni-channel strategy, DAM is really a foundational technology. And fortunately, in 2016, I think that DAM has finally really become a household term at the higher levels. So when we think about executives, really, when I started covering DAM, 8 or 9 years ago, a lot of executives just really didn't even know what DAM was and had no idea what it meant. And the whole concept of digital asset management was really something that was relegated to a very small group of people. But it's a much more common term now. Executives tend to know what it is, and they tend to understand that it's vital to a solid overall marketing strategy. So that's a great thing, and for those of you who are DAM practitioners, take heart. We've finally gotten there and gotten a lot of the recognition that we deserve as DAM practitioners, and that's great overall for marketing technology as a whole. And I see some of you are already putting in questions, which is great. So please feel free to continue to do that throughout the webinar, and I will attend to those questions at the end. So first, I want to talk about cloud. And cloud is a trend that, of course, we've written about now for a while, and as many of you know, Real Estate Group has many research streams and many research areas. But with digital asset management, it was really a little bit late to the cloud. There wasn't really many vendors that, when you think 4 or 5 years ago, that even had a cloud story. Right? They were really on-premise vendors, and the history of DAM is really an on-premise one. And of course, that's largely because they're big files, and people didn't really want to deal with transferring these files over poor bandwidths, etc. In this case, DAM has really moved towards the cloud in the last several years, but in particular in 2016, it was huge. This is a sort of cloud spectrum that I put together about 1.5 years ago, and I put this here to sort of set a context. And you've got here the vendors that we cover at Real Story Group and that we evaluate in our research. And you can see there's quite a favoring of the left-hand side of this spectrum, where most vendors were historically on-premise. There's a number of vendors that have always been in the cloud, and they're the ones that are on the far right. So Widen, WebDAM, Binder, etc. These were really vendors that were born in the cloud. But I think what's happened recently, and we'll move on here to my current rating, which is what I call cloud clout. And this is where we are, this is where we stand now as early 2017 in terms of how much vendors tend to deploy in the cloud and how much they're focused on the cloud. So you can see there's this overall move to the right where everybody is sort of at least coming up with a cloud plan or a cloud story. But really the vendors that are on the far left, those are ones that they really don't necessarily have much experience yet with the cloud, or they've just gotten certified with one of the the large cloud providers like Microsoft Azure or Amazon Web Services or whatever other pick your flavor of. Most of them have one main partner, potentially maybe two in some cases. But you can see this overall trend where it's moving to the right, where more and more organizations are looking to deploy in the cloud, and the vendors are feeling that pressure. And I will say that, you know, the important thing to mention here is that this is not a binary choice, right? It's not about just saying, well, I want an on-premise implementation or I want a cloud implementation. What I'm seeing as most common in this you know, sort of current time when it comes to new deployments, especially with large organizations, is hybrid deployments, where you have a situation perhaps where you want to run the software in the cloud, but maybe you want to keep some of your data or your very secure assets you know, on-premise, or maybe you want to have regular sync-ups with remote locations, and you want to use the cloud to do that, but you don't necessarily want to put absolutely everything in the cloud. So a lot of what you need to think about when it comes to deploying in the cloud today is this idea of what lives where, what runs where, and how does that all get coordinated, especially if you're talking about a global deployment. So this rating, I like to call it Cloud Clout, and I have the definition there, is about measuring the experience that vendors have with cloud deployments and cloud environments. And this is really constantly in motion, and it's interesting to see how this has evolved over the last year and a half, and it will surely continue to evolve in 2017. Trend number 2, I'm calling agency decoupling. So many of you are probably familiar with you know, the breakup several years ago that happened between Gwyneth Paltrow and her I guess husband at the time. It was Chris Martin from Coldplay, and sorry, my animation seemed to be a little bit overenthusiastic here today. And you know, this was something that was a sort of a Twitter storm and a big meme on the internet. This whole idea of conscious uncoupling. And one of the things that a lot of big organizations have said to me and to the whole team at Real Story Group over the last several years was, I'm overly dependent on my agency, and I need to decouple from my agency. And by agency, that usually means the creative agency, so the advertising firm that's coming up with the advertising idea, and they end up developing the assets, which might be images, it might be video, it might be a combination of you know, email campaigns, it might be a high-resolution television ad, it could be anything. And they end up, because they develop those assets, they also end up managing those assets. So it's a specific sort of situation where they might have to pay $100 every time they need a raw version of an asset, or they have the final version, but they need that one segment from the advertisement, or they need that one shot from the poster that was developed. And it's an incredible amount of money to go back to those agencies over time and get the assets that they need. So part of the driver for digital asset management today is really about decoupling from agencies, not because they're not providing the creative needs that organizations have. Advertising agencies are obviously largely great at what they do in terms of being creative and in terms of coming up with the marketing concept and the creative concept. But really, organizations don't want to have to pay through the nose to get their assets, and they don't really want their agency to manage and own the assets, especially as rights and clearances becomes more and more complex in the modern age. We want to make sure that if somebody needs an asset in the organization, that they can access it, and that anybody who's a global employee of an organization can access it without bothering an agency. So this is a big driver for DAM today. It's continuing to be a big driver for DAM, and I think it's going to continue to be even more so as we move forward. And agencies have done some interesting things. Some of them have developed their own digital asset management systems. Some of them have partnered with particular vendors in order to basically find a balance and play both sides of the field here. And I think that this needs to be really carefully planned. And so, you know, I found when I was sort of searching for these amusing images that for people who are breaking up their marriages, there's, you know, conscious uncoupling certified coaches who actually go through these sorts of trainings to figure out the best way to break up. Right? It's the same thing if you're trying to break up with your agency. And maybe think about, well, you know, you want to maintain a friendship. You want to make sure that you're still using them for the creative services that are so important for developing great advertising, great marketing. But you want to actually own your own life, right? You want to actually be able to live independently, and your assets want to be your own assets. So it's very similar to the stories that we hear about personal relationship breakups as well. You want to maintain a good relationship, but maybe you don't want to be quite so closely tied. And this is an interesting quote from Forbes. I was reading some recent articles about agency decoupling yesterday and today, and you can see here Forbes has written that decoupling can often lead to an almost 30% savings on production. And I think that there's a couple ambiguous words in this phrase, can often lead to, right? It's definitely not a guarantee. It really depends how well you go about it, right? And if you do it right. So this is something to think about if you are spending a lot of money with managing assets with your agency. All right, trend number 3. I'm going to talk about DAM and product information management and web to print. So Real Story Group has a lot of big subscribers in the sort of consumer product goods space, and a lot of companies who are in the thick of managing. Again, my over-enthusiastic animation, sorry about that, are in the thick of managing not just digital assets, but also products and packaging and things for print. When people were saying 10, 15 years ago that print was going to die, I thought it was ridiculous. I still think it's ridiculous. Managing print is still a huge part of DAM. Managing print advertising is still a huge part of DAM. And now really packaging is a huge part of DAM, and managing packages well, especially for international product companies. It's huge. And even if you're an international publisher, whether you do a print magazine or you're doing it online, you're going to need to manage the same asset in multiple ways, potentially for both print and digital. So this is an image that is from Chili Publish, and Chili Publish is specifically a web-to-print vendor. They don't consider themselves a DAM vendor, and I would definitely agree with that. But this is a tool that is OEM'd by a lot of digital asset management vendors when they have to support some kind of packaging scenario or print scenario or print advertising scenario. They often OEM this technology. So you can see Senor Pepper here, who looks, like a festive guy to have a party with, who's depicted on this package. This could of course be modifiable. You could actually modify the content on the package, and the whole unification of taking a digital asset. So the digital asset might be the picture of Senor Pepper, and the product information might be coming from a legacy system like SAP, and then the package itself, or the depiction of the package, was probably in an Adobe Illustrator file, and you need your DAM often to bring these things together into some sort of unified experience. And then this content downstream will often have to get used by a marketing automation tool or a web content management system. And hopefully you have the metadata all together in a way that you could hopefully potentially automate that. So this triad is really important in DAM today, and it's continuing to be important in DAM today. And I'll say that there's some specific vendors that are doing better jobs at that than others. And since this is a free webinar, I'm not going to tell you exactly who. You have to subscribe to our research to find out who the best vendors are at doing this. But it's a big focus, and I'm really glad to see that the vendor community is really focused on developing better functionality in this space, because it's a huge challenge for a lot of organizations. This is another picture, also, an OEM from Chili Publish, where you can see it's an advertisement that might be hanging at a stadium, and this is big for huge companies that need to syndicate their product logo across lots of different advertisers and locations. Okay, trend number 4. Creative operations management, or COM, is also a big driver for return on investment. So I don't usually talk about return on investment very much in terms of digital asset management, because I think that it's very hard to measure. And specifically with creative operations, what I'm seeing with where DAM sits sort of at the end of a creative process, where you've got final publishable, deployable digital assets at the end of a creative process, more of the ROI today is being focused on everything that comes before DAM. And so I find this an interesting development, because even though we focus at Real Story Group on looking at the whole marketing technology landscape, it's the life cycle that comes before it that a lot of people are trying to optimize. And I think this is affecting not so much the DAM technology change, but more how we are operationally changing our organizations. And so this is just a simple graphic that's from one of the vendors out there that sort of invented the term creative operations management, which is Concept Share. And you can see how they depict this as, you know, you're creating and you're managing assets. But I think where DAM fortunately is continuing to focus is on distribution and optimization. So my caution here is, you know, don't try to use DAM as a creative operations management tool. It's not. That's not what they're engineered for. And I think probably half of all the people who come to RSG with a query about DAM, they're also coming with a query about creative operations and how do we make this more efficient. And that's a collection of technologies, but it's also a process optimization task. And thinking about the whole end-to-end task is really how you're going to drive return on investment. It's not just buying a dam and putting your assets in a dam, but that's have a certain amount of return on investment. But think about it more holistically. And the creative operations picture and looking at your process is going to drive just as much of that ROI, if not more of that ROI, than just buying a dam. So that's a big trend as well, as linking all these together. Trend number 5, and this is perhaps the most fun and exciting one to talk about, I think, which is bots and everything having to do with machine learning. I have to say I was a huge skeptic about this area for a very, very long time, even though I have there goes my overenthusiastic animation again. Sorry about that. We'll go back. Even though I have a brother who has a PhD in computer science and focuses on artificial intelligence, I always sort of would debate him or with him about when are our computers actually going to get smart enough to tell me what's in a picture? You know, how long is that going to take? Well, it's here and it's now, and I got really thrilled by the developments in this area starting in late 2015, but really in 2016. It's come to a head, and we can actually start to get excited about this sort of functionality in DAM systems. So I took this from from Fortune magazine, and this is just sort of showing the development of this over time, and then I'll tie it into digital asset management. So of course AI has been around for quite a long time. Machine learning is really what flourished in the 80s and 90s, and of course now we're talking about deep learning, and we sit and watch the Olympics or a football game and we see ads about Watson and the idea of incredible big data processing machines that are not just processing, but they're also learning and then behaving differently as they learn. So just a definition here where you've got machine learning really applies statistical modeling to large amounts of data. So how is this helping us in the DAM world and as DAM practitioners? So I borrowed this from Style Labs, who's one of the many vendors that we cover at Real Story Group. That's a DAM and sort of a broader MarTech vendor as well. And they recently added image recognition to their software. And but they didn't develop it from the ground up, right? They said, well, there's now services out there that you can do this, and so this is not at all unique to Style Labs. I just liked the way they laid this out when they were trying to figure out exactly what service they were going to use to do image recognition, and so this is back from June 2016, as I mentioned, where we're looking at 3 services that exist. There's a cloud service from Microsoft that lives in Azure. There's a Google service now that does image recognition and analysis. And then there's a specific vendor called Clarify that many of you may have heard of, that some DAM vendors are experimenting with as well as an OEM to do image analysis on ingest. So the idea now with using these technologies is that the DAM vendors will OEM this, and of course if you have your DAM in the cloud and you're leveraging the cognitive recognition services that exist in these cloud provider services, it's of course not limited to your own corpus of images. It's actually able to leverage the intelligence of what's been analyzed by everything else that's been analyzed in the past, regardless of the source, etc. So this analysis is showing the results for this particular image, where you've got this roasted pork sandwich with this tasty looking slaw on top and this lovely toasted bun. And so you can see what Microsoft came up with, saying, well, this is a close-up of a sandwich on a plate, and maybe it's sitting on a table and it's food and it looks like it's indoors and it's a sandwich and food and cooked, right? So there's some duplication there, but pretty accurate, right? And then there's what Google came up with. which are very similar, but it's even more specifically pork, and they actually called it a slider, which is pretty, actually that's, I think, a pretty spectacular analysis there that it came up with slider, but it said maybe it's roast beef. So of course this is where, the human being could say, well, this is actually pork, could maybe select and make it more specific. Now Clarify, I think, really did a couple things that were slightly different, like no person. Whether or not there's a person in an image is often something that a lot of people are trying to find and identify accurately. So that was an analysis from June 2016, but look at this sort of difference between June and November. So this is I find, particularly, as I mentioned, interesting to see how this has progressed in the last year. And look at how much more specific sort of stuff that's come up. So column 1 versus column 2, you've got Microsoft, Google, Clarify, and you can see what's happening also is that these domain-specific models are being developed. So Clarify has food items 1.0, and that's, of course, a vocabulary that's been developed over time as they analyze these images. And it gets more specific to the point where it says it's a bun, it's a brioche, and it looks delicious, apparently, right? So there's some of these analyses that come through that are perhaps a little bit more ambiguous than others, but then they're getting more and more specific as they learn. I think one of the most important developments with this whole area of bots and machine learning is emotion detection. And it's been a decade plus for me where people have said, I just want to be able to find an image, of someone who is expressing X or Y, or I want to find an image that is full of a very diverse group of people from a cultural perspective or a race perspective, because I want to show the diversity of our organization. This is the kind of thing that hasn't really been searchable in the past within our digital asset management systems unless we had someone actually manually going through and tagging that way. But here's an example of Google and Microsoft's identification of this person's face. And this is pretty darn accurate, again, where you're looking at joy or well, no, she doesn't look happy. Very unlikely, right? So you got the variables here. Maybe she could possibly be angry, but it's unlikely that she has all these other things. But look at how Microsoft, of course, is providing basically a percentage of potential accuracy. That's what this data point is here. So disgust, it's 72% of a chance that it's disgust, right? So you've got some interesting possibilities here. And again, it's far from perfect, but it's definitely getting better. And I think we probably all can agree that finding legions of people to tag things is difficult. Really, the biggest success I've seen with lots of human input on metadata tagging is very specifically always outsourcing that. And over time, that can be expensive. So I think in the future now, it's going to be a combination of these things. It's going to be smart technology and humans correcting that smart technology. So I'm almost out of time, so let me just talk about some crossover trends and what do these DAM trends, or how do these DAM trends fit into the bigger picture. So many of you are surely familiar with Scott Brinker, Chief Martech, and we work with him on his conferences, and he's a brilliant gentleman. And so I wanted to bring in his graphic here because, of course, the landscape is giant, right? It's absolutely huge. There's just thousands of vendors in the marketing technology landscape, and one of the predictions that we made in our webinar last week, hosted by my colleague Jared, was that we said, well, MarTech vendors are going to continue to, or they begin to die off, and I have written in our market analysis that we sort of reached a MarTech hype peak of the hype curve, I think, with this ridiculous selection of technologies we have. And so we're going to focus on quality now, and I think that's what's happening in the DAM space too, where vendors that have, frankly, really old crap code bases are starting to die and are really not doing well financially and aren't gaining new customers. And I think that's good. I think that's healthy for the buyer, and that's what needs to happen. It's a normal cycle. So I think that's an important factor here, and I think that's going to play into the DAM space here. These are the vendors that we cover in the digital marketing landscape, and you can see here in the middle is the digital marketing asset management. These are the vendors that we evaluate in our research. So I think there's a good chance that some more of these will get acquired. And in most cases, it's actually pretty good when a DAM vendor so far has gotten acquired. It's been very good for Media Beacon, for example, who was acquired by a much larger company a couple of years ago. It's been, it's been very good for them from a growth perspective and whatnot. So I think that's going to happen with more of these. With more of these vendors in the coming year, because most DAM vendors are actually still pretty small. Most of them, are 10 to 15 million dollar a year companies, and aren't necessarily very good at selling their software. So when they get the support of a larger organization, sometimes it really helps not only you as a buyer, because it makes it easier for you to justify bringing in a vendor that's got more of an equity backing or is owned by a larger organization, but it also helps them often have more focus in things like project management and just being better salespeople too. So there we go. Okay, so to wrap up here, I'm just going to show our reality check, which many of you have seen the reality check before. I will first say this is not a magic quadrant. This is not a wave, so it's not actually good to be really in the top right of this slide. This is about change, right? This across the horizontal axis you have vendor evolution, and this is how fast is the vendor evolving, how fast is the vendor changing, and then across the vertical axis you've got product development. So is this vendor doing new things with the product? Are they innovating? Are they changing things in a rapid way? So I always say there's no necessarily really good place to be on this chart. It really matters your context as a buyer. I have people who come to me and say, you know what, I've been with this vendor for 5 years, but they're not innovating enough for me, and I want to be more cutting edge. So I say, well, then look at a vendor in the top three quadrants. And then there's others who say, I want a vendor that's going to do like one major release a year and isn't going to drive me crazy with like constant new releases, and I just want to kind of be slow and steady. And so that's the vendors that are more to the left and the bottom. And there's an in-depth analysis of this in our market update that was published on Monday. So I would encourage you, if you're not a subscriber, obviously, you want to really understand why each of these vendors are where they are. You can definitely tune into our research on that. Finally, I want to talk about the importance of customer relationship management in all this, in this big picture. So many of you are familiar with this slide. We use it a lot. It's our reference model for marketing and marketing technology, and it's really important to think about how is my data going to move back and forth. So I call this defining the slings and arrows. These diagrams get thrown around, and everybody talks about we need to connect this to this, and we need to make sure that our customer data is synced up with our marketing automation tool. And I say, but yes, but how, right? So let's talk about exactly how that's going to work, because customer data really needs to become more omnipresent in our organizations, and by that I mean not just the data itself, but also conceptually. We need to constantly be thinking about our customers, empathetic towards our customers, because every asset needs to speak to that customer. Every asset needs to move through the flow of marketing and publishing and content with the customer in mind. So this trend is perhaps the icing on the cake, right? You really need to think about all these technologies in the context of the customer information. And if you're not good at managing customer information yet, then don't bother with everything else, right? You really need to get this lined up and organized before you move forward. So with that, let me have a look at some of your questions, and maybe Scott, if you have anything else to say while I read the questions, why don't you do that, and I will just see if I can answer any of these before we wrap up.
I do. Thank you very much, Teresa. It's some great info on what to expect in the DAM world and digital marketing as a whole in the coming year. As a quick reminder, the slides will be sent to you as an attendee, and for our subscribers, the recording will be available in the next couple of days within your library. Teresa not only authors our DAM research, but also is available to you as an advisor to help guide your digital journey. Her and the rest of our analyst team can be really leveraged as part of a plus subscription to our research, and we'd be happy to talk with you more about that and walk you through our different tools. And if that's something you'd like to participate in, please don't hesitate to reach out to us at engage@realstorygroup.com. Also, next week we'll be hosting 2 webinars. The first will be for selecting web content management vendors. That'll be on Tuesday at 12 Eastern. Some of the latest techniques for picking the technology that's the right fit for you. And then on Wednesday, for our subscribers, it's the first in our series of vendor smackdowns, where we'll be taking a look at Adobe versus Sitecore versus Drupal. So for our subscribers, we certainly hope you can join us for that. With that, Teresa, that looks like there are a couple of questions for you.
Yeah, someone asked me, what if a vendor is missing from the subway map? It just means we don't cover them if they're not on the subway map. The subway map gets updated a couple times every year. If there's some cases where we follow a vendor, but we don't necessarily have a full written evaluation of them. So sometimes we have ratings for vendors in our Real Quadrant application, but we don't necessarily have a full written review. But if they're on the subway map, that means we have research, very in-depth research on that vendor. But if they're not, it means we don't have a write-up on them. But again, we follow a lot more vendors than we actually have write-ups on. So that's really the only thing that it means. And then most of the other things here were actually comments more than questions. But someone asked a good question about the facial recognition slide, where there was apparently the happiness rating had the highest ranking there. And I think I'm going to go back and I'm going to find out, because let me see if I just go back to that slide. I always like it when someone points out an interesting anomaly in one of the slides. So the person who was asking there said, why does it say happiness 9.0? I wonder actually if that was an error on the part of the software. But I'll go back and I'll ask the guys who ran the test at Style Labs about that, because I wonder if that was misinterpreted by the Microsoft image recognition, because obviously that doesn't really make sense. So David, be sure to tweet at me or send me an email, and I'll get back to you on that. So thanks for pointing that out. And a couple people were affirming about print and some of the comments that I made. So that was all the questions, though. So I'll close there and say thank you very much for joining us, and looking forward hopefully to seeing many of you in 2017. Thank you.